The VMAs are upon us yet again, and as we sink further into our brave new world of fractured attention spans and an ever-declining monoculture, I am always left to wonder, why should we care about the VMAs? I remember as a teen in Singapore, so far away from the nexus of popular culture in cities like Los Angeles and New York City, I felt for a moment while watching the VMAs live on television that I was part of the biggest conversation in the world, witnessing history in real time from my sofa. When the VMAs were really relevant, they were a true water cooler moment, sparking shock, conversation, and debate across the world with outlandish performances, iconic red carpet looks, and deranged celebrity interactions. I'd say the last really good VMAs that we had was probably in 2013. Everything since then has felt a little bit toothless and a bit too forced, like they were trying to drive conversation instead of just doing it. There is, in fact, a reason for this and a story behind the VMAs losing their place as pop culture's premier event. In today's video, we're going to go all the way back to the start of the VMAs and do a little bit of an autopsy. We're going to pick apart the bones of MTV as an organization, uncover how the VMAs basically became the anti-Grammys by trafficking in celebrity drama and the unpredictability of live television, all while revisiting the most iconic VMA moments of all time. I'm also going to try and answer the question of, can the VMAs make a comeback? Or is it simply impossible for the sheer impact of one televised event to be so seismic in 2024? I don't think we're going to have a very good VMAs this year, to be honest. Too much has changed. Celebrity culture is really different, and our societal attitudes towards women and their humiliation, which was a key feature of the VMAs' 2000s success, has changed. And the platforms where we have pop culture conversations are entirely different too. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. My name is Zach. I'm the Swiftologist. I make thoughtful weekly videos about pop culture, and today you're watching my extraordinary deep dive into the VMA's messy history, and stay tuned for more of that, because next week you'll be getting my VMA reaction, hopefully if the copyright isn't too crazy, which I'm not hopeful about. There will also be a lot of other topical content coming very soon. Katy Perry's releasing a new album, and you best believe I gotta be talking about that. So if you like thoughtful pop culture, make sure to subscribe. Over 50% of you that watch my channel are not subscribed, and that's really mean. So let's rectify that now, shall we? Let's go all the way back to the beginning, shall we? In 1984, MTV wanted to take a jab at the Recording Academy's self-seriousness. The Grammys were, and still continue to be, the most prestigious awarding body in the music industry. Winning a Grammy is like summiting Mount Everest. Not only have you created something that people want to buy and listen to and come to shows of, an entire coalition of executives in your industry has also deigned to congratulate you on your achievement. MTV, however, was not chasing prestige or respectability in the 80s. Since its inception in 1981, MTV's goal was to spread the art of the music video, convincing musicians and fans that there was more than one way to consume music, completely expanding the art form of the music video from being an expensive and unnecessary vanity project to what we can now see is often the deciding factor in a song's success, relevance, and even its longevity. To spread the gospel of this art and legitimize the music video form, MTV organized the very first Video Music Awards in 1984. Enter the iconic Moon Man, the awarding statue, which is a nod to MTV's first televised broadcast, footage of the moon landing with the MTV flag edited into it. Some of the first winners of a Moon Man were Michael Jackson for Thriller and Cyndi Lauper for Girls Just Want to Have Fun. So it's always kind of been a Legends-only occasion. But the first water cooler moment is a credit to one of the great video music artists of all time, Madonna. Her raunchy performance of Like a Virgin featured her dry humping a stage shaped like a wedding cake in a bustier, garter belt, and wedding gown. This may seem rather tame to you in this day and age, but for the mid-80s, it was revolutionary. This was essentially, for your reference, if you weren't around during that period of time like me, Madonna's We Can't Stop with Robin Thicke. It was scandalizing, and it had people talking about it the day after it aired. So with this at its inaugural broadcast, it didn't take long for the VMAs to gain cultural cachet. On its fifth broadcast in 1988, Michael Jackson appeared and was honored as the very first recipient of the Video Vanguard Award, which would later be renamed the Michael Jackson Vanguard Award. The VMAs were instantly viewed as the Grammys' unserious alter ego. Because the award show was not shrouded in airs and graces, and most of the awards were in fact fan-voted, there was no need for the artists to prostrate themselves to the industry and to show their gratitude. They could just show up to the MTV VMAs for a good night out. The red carpet was also more relaxed and low-key, and even if you didn't have anything to promote, a feature that has stuck with the VMAs from its inception is the ingenious crowd shot. Think about how many of these moments have gone viral in later years. So even if you were off record cycle, or you were about to launch a record but hadn't quite made the steps to do one, or you were trying to get your label to give you a little bit more budget to make a record, you could make an appearance at the VMAs and generate some buzz, maybe maybe get some good press that would help you along the way. Because of the VMA's self-proclaimed non-seriousness, celebs pretty much instantly started causing trouble when given microphones on live television. Think about it. You're on a good night out, basically, with your team. You've just been to the green room at the VMAs, and you've been showered with free gifts and swag and liquor to write up, and now all of a sudden, you have to present an award. The VMAs were late, too. One of the first controversies from a VMA telecast was in 1989 when the comedian Andrew Dice Clays received a lifetime ban from the ceremony by introducing Cher with nursery rhymes composed with vulgar language and lewd imagery.
Well, Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet, eating her curds and whey. One came a Spidey, sat them beside, he said, "Hey, what's in the bowl, bitch? Oh!"
Also at this taping, a physical and verbal altercation between Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue. These are the kind of people that you're not going to see at the VMAs now, and I think that's part of the problem. Madonna also used this opportunity to publicly and sarcastically thank Pepsi for paying her $5 million for a commercial they pulled off the air very quickly after the subject matter of the song she was promoting, Like a Prayer, was revealed. And that music video, if you haven't seen it, is very iconic, and it caused a lot of ruckus with the Catholic Church, so best to dissociate themselves. But, you know, they Streisand affected it. So here's where the VMA's special sauce is born. Chaotic performances, tension between celebrity guests, using the VMAs as a platform to launch or continue a high-profile beef, and general bad guest etiquette, swearing when you were introducing someone, or perhaps later on in the 2000s, interrupting someone else's speech. The VMAs evolved massively in both production value and cultural significance in the 1990s. With more advanced technology, the advent of digital editing, and improved special effects, the music video's art was further refined. Music videos became more stylized and theatrical and more similar to movie trailers than concert DVDs. And many more people were tuning into MTV to see shows like TRL, Total Request Live, to see which music video placed in their coveted top spot of the countdown. What I mean to say here is that the experience of listening to music changed from being something purely auditory to also being something visual, and MTV was really at the forefront of that. We had these incredible music video directors in this time like Hype Williams really upping the ante here with Missy Elliott's The Rain Super Duper Fly music video that featured numerous innovative visual and special effects. Spike Jonze also became known for his clever and surreal narratives through his work with Weezer and the Beastie Boys. David Fincher also brought a real cinematic feel to the art form, setting high standards with Madonna's elegant, refined, and glamorous music video for Vogue. Music videos suddenly, I would say, in the 90s were the most powerful tool in the success of an album campaign. They also evolved to be somewhat political or ethical in messaging too. The forum was expanding. Janet Jackson's plea for social unity was immediately clear in the iconic Rhythm Nation video. And again, MTV is technically spearheading all of this innovation. And what was always kind of funny about the VMAs was how often it got itself into trouble. You simply cannot just, advertise your award show as the bad boy alternative to the Grammys and then act surprised when there are fistfights on the premises. There was always someone getting banned from the channel for doing this, that, or the other thing. You really couldn't get these people to behave, especially when you put a live camera on them. And the live element of the VMAs was always terribly interesting. The potential for something to go wrong, in fact, became an integral part of the VMA experience. Were we, the viewer, the voyeur, tuning in to watch our stars fall? Just like a music video could make your career, a bad performance at the VMAs could technically break your career too. Just ask Britney Spears, my queen. An early example of this was Poison's disastrous performance at the 1991 VMAs, where they had to start over. Some guitar got unplugged and the band members threw punches at each other backstage, leading to the guitarist getting fired from the band. It wasn't always a good idea to perform at the VMAs if you weren't getting along, but for a brief period of time in the early 90s, sometimes the VMAs felt truly countercultural. This was usually because they invited artists who would take the opportunity to make a moment on live television. Some artists quickly realized the potential of the live medium to shock the public on purpose as well. Also in 1991, Prince performed in a custom outfit that showed off his butt cheeks. This was extremely scandalizing, and James Charles owes Prince a debt of gratitude for all those Coachella fits. Fiona Apple famously used her time to make a plea to her audience while accepting the award for Best New Artist Video for Sleep to Dream, calling this world BS and quoting Maya Angelou saying, "Go with yourself," basically telling them that fame was a lie and a scam. This was received poorly by the media, who viewed it as quite hypocritical, but if you know anything about Fiona Apple, particularly during this era, that kind of expression comes as no surprise. So why did MTV put up with all this bad behavior and the potential for a train wreck live on television, dealing with headaches from cable censorship? Well, ratings, ratings, and ratings. Though sometimes their willingness to tolerate bad behavior did wear thin. Nirvana, an MTV darling with the iconic Smells Like Teen Spirit music video, was really, ratcheting things up in the grunge space. They had creative differences with the networks over what to perform in 1992 when they were asked to be at the VMAs. They were asked to sing their biggest single, the aforementioned Smells Like Teen Spirit, but Kurt Cobain instead wanted to perform either a song called Tourette's or Rip Me. You can see why MTV was perhaps not keen on those selections. They compromised on another song called Lithium, but Kurt Cobain did a bait and switch live on air by playing the opening chords to Rip Me anyway. The bassist also almost accidentally knocked himself out on stage while trying to throw his instrument, by the way, while they were trashing their equipment at the end of the song. So it was a little bit shambolic, shall we say, but what do you expect from Nirvana? MTV knew what they were getting into by inviting Kurt Cobain on live television. And a few years later, speaking of Kurt Cobain, in 1995, Courtney Love showed up and caused a similar ruckus after performing her band's song Violet, trashing the stage and hilariously throwing her makeup compact at Madonna while she was giving a red carpet interview, leading Madonna to utter the iconic line, "Courtney Love is desperate for my attention."
That's Courtney, everybody's favorite. Come on up.
Should we let her come up?
Yeah.
No, don't, please.
Come on, Courtney.
Hi. Good.
We also had clever stunts that addressed what was going on in popular culture outside of the VMAs, referenced during the show. For example, Howard Stern showed up to the VMAs as his alter ego, Fartman, wearing an outfit like Prince's Cheek Extravaganza to mock him. Lisa Marie Presley and Michael Jackson kissed on stage to a standing ovation after rumors about their sham marriage had been circulating. So similarly, Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey, two legends, poked fun at their alleged feud that had been much riled up by the tabloids by showing up to present an award together in look-alike Vera Wang dresses, doing a cute little skit. Obviously, their publicists and the producers of the VMAs concocted this little scheme to get in headlines, but this is an incredibly intelligent thing to do for everyone involved, especially for the two feuding artists. Showing that you're in on the joke and that you have a sense of humor was really important, and that's always a good way to get people to stop being very vicious about you, by showing that you're in on the joke. And where else could you have the opportunity to express that you were okay with a little bit of, snarky chatter about you? There was no social media then. You couldn't just repost a "girl so confusing" edit of you and your alleged nemesis and lol about it to quell the chatter. Instead, artists relied on televised appearances on morning shows, which are generally more sanitized and focused on promoting a project, certainly not places to squash beefs, or by giving interviews to the news media in print, which more often than not were inclined to editorialize what the celebrities say and take it out of context. Here was a prime time viewing opportunity with a large young viewership at home for any star to theoretically try and clear their name. There are also many iconic VMA fashion looks from the 90s that are still referenced as influences to this day, and this gave opportunities for non-musicians to get some press as well. RuPaul looked extremely glamorous on the red carpet in 1993, which was no small achievement for a drag artist 30 years ago. Pamela Anderson played up her pin-up reputation in a white corset bustier in 1999. Gwyneth Paltrow, one of our original It girls, wore a red velvet Gucci suit in 1996 that definitely made an impression. And then we had the scandalizing element of all of these outfits, because that's always been a part of VMAs, like kind of graphic bodily autonomy, starting with Rose McGowan's bum-bearing dress in 1998 and continuing with Lil' Kim's iconic and often referenced one bare boob purple gown and a purple wig to boot. Now, what you may have noticed by now is that in the 80s and the 90s, pop music was a much more encompassing genre. Hair metal bands, hip-hop and rap artists, folk singer-songwriters, and true blue divas were all considered to be in the same bucket, just because they were kind of, popular and equally part of the mainstream. It's hard to imagine an iteration of today's VMAs sharing in that kind of equal genre opportunity. There's also just been a kind of general flattening of genre in music anyway, but that's a subject for another day. Thanks to all of this commotion, though, the ratings rose steadily throughout the 90s, reaching a high of 11 million viewers in 1999. The continued rise of personal internet usage in the 2000s would also propel the VMA discourse and water cooler moments to a peak point. But did MTV and the VMAs themselves catch on to this seismic development in the way we were consuming media in time to save their broadcast from its eventual fade into irrelevance? Maybe not. The perfect way to close out this decade was to introduce the kind of pop music that would basically go on to rule the VMAs and most of our televised award shows forever, with a performance introducing one Britney Spears, who introduced the teen sensation NSYNC, two supernovas taking their rightful place in the age of the music video. To them, and to so many artists afterwards, the visual performance was just as, if not more important, than the music itself. Britney's performance of Baby One More Time, set in a futuristic high school classroom, is one of my favorites. Before we get into the rest of the video, here's a message from our sponsor, Perplexity. Divas, before we get any further into today's video, I want to introduce you to a tool that was invaluable to the research I did today, and the research for all my videos, actually. Perplexity is an AI search engine that provides conversational responses to questions rather than a list of hyperlinks, and they are partnering with me on today's video. Through October 31st, 2024, Uber One and Perplexity have teamed up to give every Uber One member, which is a membership to save on Uber and Uber Eats, in the United States and Canada, 1 year of Perplexity Pro, which is $200 value. As an AI search engine, Perplexity is taking the world by storm. Ask a question or look something up and you'll receive up-to-date answers instead of a list of 10 blue links provided by a traditional search engine. With Perplexity, you can find information and learn more about any topic. It can answer questions that other search engines can't provide quality answers to. For example, why are the Billboard charts so important to record labels? This was extremely useful when I was compiling background research for the video that I recently made about Taylor Swift's chart history. It's great news for my North American divas all around. Uber One members can benefit from these amazing Perplexity features. For example, Perplexity Pro Search with the ability to break down queries into smaller steps, which allows for a more comprehensive and accurate search, and the option to select from different advanced AI models, including OpenAI's GPT-4, Anthropic's Claude 3 Opus, and Claude 3.5 Sonnet, and Perplexity's Sonar models. So instead of buying multiple subscriptions, you can get everything that you need just with Perplexity. Get 1 year of Perplexity Pro for free via the link in my description, or scan the QR code on screen right now through October 21st, 2024. This is a $200 value, as I mentioned, so hurry up and get scanning. Let's get right back into this video. All right, now we're heading into the iconic 2000s era of the VMAs. This was the golden era of the Video Music Awards. It was well established at this point as a singular cultural event that people often look forward to at the end of the summer in a primetime viewing slot that targeted a younger demographic. Celebrities also were by now very well aware of the power of a VMA moment, which only incentivized them to attend and create one of their own. What you'll notice about the VMAs now is that there's often a lackluster attendance, with only a few stars who are really able to galvanize people to tune in. And even the presence in this day and age of a megastar like Taylor Swift and Beyonce is not exactly a silver bullet to get excellent ratings. They continue to sag year upon year. But when it was a truly unique cultural moment where not only music stars, but Hollywood stars and business executives all gathered to bask in the moment, one really felt like this was the monoculture at its finest. A performance or a controversial incident could transcend the attention of those plugged into popular culture and make it on the news, for example, or spark heated debate about social norms in more serious areas of media that would not seriously discuss certain people or conversations in general. A contemporary example of this is the huge reaction to Miley Cyrus's disastrous performance of We Can't Stop with Robin Thicke in 2013, which prompted months and months of discussion online about cultural appropriation, consent via the blurred lines controversy, and slut shaming. But there will be much more on that when we get into the later era of the VMAs. Let's zoom in on one particular VMA in this early time period that has everything that made the VMAs the television spectacle to watch live. The 2000 VMAs had it all. Yes, the millennium. There was performance, there was drama, and there was excellence too. And there were 3 Titan performances that I think really indicated where we were as a culture this evening: Britney Spears, NSYNC, and Eminem. First, we have the legendary Miss Britney Spears' butterfly moment. She visually escapes the cocoon of her childish image, which is kind of absurd because, you know, from the start, from this era that's on my shirt, Baby One More Time, she was sexualized. But this was her full-throated, I am woman, hear me roar arrival moment. She was no longer going to make any apologies or take any BS about wanting to be a sex symbol. She arrives on stage singing the angsty, brooding, I Can't Get No Satisfaction, a Rolling Stones song, literally wearing her mysterious sneak-around clothes, ducking coyly under a fedora. I Can't Get No Satisfaction is literally a song about, like, edging. It's inherently teasing and sexual, and choosing to perform this before what she was about to go on and do was a very deliberate statement. Britney really understood the power of a visual performance, especially on TV. She tears off the suit and reveals a nude, sparkling bodysuit that very much looks like she's just naked. This is something that other artists would go on to replicate as well, thus well and truly beginning a reign of terror for young women everywhere, the belly-bearing, low-rise pant period. Britney was the queen of it, but I digress. Britney is so fully embodied in this performance that it is genuinely shocking. This is a star. She's writhing around, her hair is so clearly deliberately tousled in a bedhead style, again implying a very kind of graphic sexuality, without her even really having to say anything or do anything graphic. The song itself, Oops, I Did It Again, which was somewhat mocked at the time as her newest single, a very candy-coated bubblegum pop confection, is sawn apart with this electric guitar replacing the hokey, Titanic spoken word interlude. This was truly her, the old Britney can't come to the phone right now moment. Why? Because she's dead. Oops, I literally did it again. The public's deeply nuanced understanding of this performance was perfectly summarized by the host after Britney left the stage. The girl done went from the Mickey Mouse Club to the strip club. Gorgeous. A theme you're going to see in this video recurring over and over again is men being terrible to female artists at the VMAs. Everything about this performance, though, is so iconic. The staccato handography, the control that she has over her stomach and her lower body just as a dancer, the hair movement, the ass shaking, it's diva behavior. And by far, the performance of the evening. It was a water cooler moment. Britney was all grown up. She was also introduced by one of the co-founders of Napster, a controversial peer-to-peer file sharing network that altered the way we consume music forever, aka introducing audio pirating. It was eventually shut down in 2001 due to the multiple copyright violations it downright encouraged because it was basically a torrenting service. LimeWire, heard of it? You may have encountered that. I know I did. Having Napster's co-founder, Sean Fanning, introduce Britney Spears symbolized the dramatic shift that was taking place in the music landscape. It represented the intersection of pop culture and digital innovation, highlighting how artists like Britney were navigating a new era of music distribution that was increasingly defined by accessibility and the internet. Something like this could only ever happen at the VMAs, getting these two together and kind of like accidentally speaking to some sort of alchemy that was going on in the culture. While maybe not even intentional, it was certainly very reflective of where we were. Just a year later, Britney delivered the most iconic VMA performance ever, Slay For You Live at the VMAs. Heard of it? Banana the albino snake wrapped around her shoulders, eating up that choreography after emerging from a cage with a literal live tiger. This has become kind of the blueprint of eating it up. You'll see that clip shared over and over again on Twitter even now. There's a meme in the Britney army about the fire in her eyes during this performance, and I think that that's what made Britney such a good 2000s star, is that she was incredibly telegenic. She was able to communicate and command presence not just in the room but through a lens as well. Difficult to do. Not everybody can do that. But back to the 2000 VMAs, Britney's rendition of Oops wasn't the only marquee performance of the night. Eminem's performance of The Real Slim Shady and The Way I Am was a performance that truly reflected the evolution of fan culture and the record label's current quest to create multiple versions of the same star to compete with each other in the music industry. Eminem's performance, I find it hard to talk positively about Eminem. I really dislike him. Showcased a crowd of lookalikes dressed as his alter ego, Slim Shady, symbolizing the deep bond between the rapper and his fans and an increasing parasocialism where fans almost wanted to become their idol. This visual display of fans mimicking his persona underscored this growing trend of a new kind of activity within music culture, moving beyond passive listening. The iconic phrase, "Will the real Slim Shady please stand up?" has become a cultural reference point, highlighting the yearning for authenticity in a world dominated by manufactured pop stars. The performance also began outside Radio City Music Hall and transitioned into the venue as it continued, really kind of like breaking traditional boundaries of what a live televised performance could be and upping the ante of live production music performance value as well. Something Taylor Swift would do again, albeit with a pre-taped segment and a bit of drama in 2009. Back to 2000 though, by 2000, hip-hop had really firmly established itself in the mainstream music scene, and Eminem's performance was a testament to this shift. His success and visibility at the VMAs signaled a kind of broader acceptance of hip-hop culture within popular music, showcasing how artists from this genre were influencing the music landscape and fan culture. This moment represented a turning point where hip-hop artists were not only celebrated but also became central figures in major music award shows. Now, there's definitely an element of whiteness here to be discussed. Is it a coincidence that the Trojan horse of hip-hop into really true and blue mainstream was Eminem? There is. Eminem is, to me personally, one of the more repugnant male artists of our time, but that's really too big of a diatribe for this video. Just know that I am perpetually side-eyeing him. Speaking of labels trying to churn out copies of other artists to capitalize on their market share, as Eminem was commenting on in The Real Slim Shady, an enduring legacy for Christina Aguilera, Queenie, at the VMAs is completely getting dwarfed by the shadow of Britney Spears, who was just so iconic that no other diva could really pierce through the noise when she was around. It's actually kind of embarrassing how Christina was completely written out of the history books at the VMAs, basically. Especially this year. Christina also performed at this VMAs with Fred Durst, but do we remember that? No. We remember Britney in the cage. We also did not remember that Christina kissed Madonna during that VMA performance, literally a second after she kissed Britney, because Christina was cropped out of the magazine covers. Yeah. Let's move on to some more mediocre men. NSYNC. In 2000, NSYNC was really at the pinnacle of the boy band craze, which had taken over the music landscape in the late 1990s and the early 2000s. Their performance at this version of the VMAs of Bye 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 also had a very high production value. They were kind of killing it production-wise, this one, with the group performing behind large screens that displayed their heads. This blend of visual spectacle and choreography was a hallmark of the era, emphasizing the importance of upping the ante of production quality in live music, but it also, I think, symbolized this kind of growing split sense of self we were developing as the internet continued to evolve, with your physical body kind of becoming the secondary aspect to your true self, this floating head that lived inside of a screen. How current does that feel now in the TikTok era? Girl, I'm just a floating head in your screen. Isn't that crazy? There was, of course, also that signature boy band choreography that would go on to be much refined and far surpassed in technical excellence and precision by K-pop groups in later years. The choreography they performed to Bye 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 was also something that their fans were learning at home. Similarly, this happened with Oops, I Did It Again too, and videotaping themselves doing the choreography to send into TRL, which would be aired on MTV. If you really think about it, that's like the prehistoric version of a TikTok trending dance or sound. It is. But that's not all. Since I've just told you about the performances, why don't I tell you about the mess at the 2000s VMAs? Because if they're not messy, then the VMAs are not interesting. That's what you'll find. This is what we're missing now in this day and age. Celebrities are far too self-conscious and have so many more opportunities to control their narrative. Why risk it all on live TV just for a moment that could really go one way or another? Again, putting so many different kinds of artists, personalities, creatives, temperaments into one room and treating them with equal importance really gave way to some shocking moments that were best experienced live, truly. When Limp Bizkit, those are words I never thought I'd say on my channel, took home the award for Best Rock Video, Rage Against the Machine's bassist Tim Comerford climbed onto the stage's scaffolding and started heckling Limp Bizkit. Fred Durst encouraged this guy, shouting, stage dive, take a dive," and ended his speech by saying, "This guy's a pussy because he won't jump." As a result, the Rage Against the Machine guy and his bodyguard spent the night in jail. This happened on live television, mind you. Live television. Speaking of mess, Christina and Britney put rumors of their feud to bed, or at least they tried to, by walking on stage together holding hands to introduce Whitney Houston, who emerged iconically from a tunnel singing an a cappella version of I Will Always Love You, which, you know, to all my little Gen Z girlies was like the Old Town Road of 2000 after the movie The Bodyguard came out. Whitney was definitely in a bad spot with the public at this moment. She'd been arrested for drug use, and she was kind of at this point known for acting erratically, more known for that than her incredible talent. And theoretically, this would have been a really great opportunity at the VMAs to present herself as composed and serious. But she acted erratically anyway, which in hindsight was way more fun. But do you see how seismic a short VMA cameo can be? It can reinforce what people already know about you, or potentially display you in a completely different light and generate conversation about that for days. Again, this was a revolutionary opportunity for people in the pre-social media era. So we've got great music and showmanship, fantastic spur of the moment drama at the 2000 VMAs, but do we have the third ingredient for a truly iconic VMA year? Looks. Fashion. Well, yes. Though this year didn't necessarily have one standout image, there were plenty of looks here that you will see and immediately recognize as endlessly relevant because they've come back into fashion in 2024. I think a lot of these looks are very emblematic of the next decade of fashion and what it would look like. So we start with Jennifer Lopez in a bedazzled tube top with her boyfriend's name on it, he who shall not be named, with a chunky belt and low-rise jeans, wearing hoop earrings and a bandana. Then we've got NSYNC dressed like Gen Z NPCs in various oversized garments, bedazzled camo, mesh, and they're all sporting those frosted tips. We have Ricky Martin in a Robin Hood Waterworld-esque deconstructed shirt, and the gorgeous Aaliyah at her very last VMAs before her untimely death in this iconic Cavalli animal print dress, which was, fun fact, worn again many years later by Bretman Rock. Did Bretman Rock deserve to wear that gown? I don't know. But you know, they're scraping the barrel at the VMAs. They really are. They can't get real celebrities to come on the carpet anymore. Destiny's Child also appeared in the 2000 VMAs red carpet in a full custom House of Dairy line, aka Beyonce's mom's clothing line, which was hugely influential in fashion in the 2000s. And now this is just plain excellence. Pink in whatever the hell this is. Take a minute to absorb all of that. First, look at the Cynthia from the Rugrats hair. Second, look at the floor-length, full-sleeve fur coat. Third, look at those half booty wedges. I don't even really know what they are. But Pink did that. She did that. Here's Nelly with his name iced out on a chain, wearing a baseball cap and Gucci pants, and a simple tank top with a pager strapped to his waist. Sir, do you have patients to attend to? Is this Grey's Anatomy? Because the VMAs were in essence supposed to be more real and low-key than other award shows, we really saw these kind of elevated street styles on the red carpet. It was boring seeing men in tuxes and women in gowns at the Grammys and the Oscars. This really kind of mixed it up. The VMAs' last high rating spike at almost 12 million live viewers was in 2002. This was a pretty tense year for the VMAs, I would say, mostly marked by onstage confrontations provoked by the one and only misogynistic loser, Eminem. Eminem was legit having beef with a puppet who was working the crowd. The puppet kind of playfully made a joke about a back and forth Eminem had been having with Moby in public. Moby called Eminem a violent homophobe and misogynist, which, like, if the shoe fits, you know? If you think that's an extreme thing to say, I suggest that you go and look into some of the lyrics that Eminem has written over his life. In response, Eminem decided to call Moby the F slur in a song. The VMAs is also being hosted by Triumph the Insult Comedy Dog, and the Comedy Dog is making fun of this beef and being lighthearted about it, but when it comes time for Eminem to just say haha and move on, he freaks out. He legit is so easy to rile up and has zero sense of humor about himself, so it made him look like a loser, but it made for great TV. I also think it's pretty terrible that the VMAs set Christina Aguilera up to present an award to Eminem this evening, given what he had said about her. I know the VMAs likes to stir up controversy, but this was no silly or trivial celebrity feud. All Christina ever said about Eminem was that she thought he was cute, but she thinks he's still married to his wife. She also was vocal about how she thought it was weird that Eminem could not write a song about his own wife without graphically describing killing her and enlisting his toddler to help dispose of her body. He literally did that. And this is what Eminem said in response in a song about Christina Aguilera. Christina Aguilera better switch chairs with me so I can sit next to Carson and Fred and hear them argue over who she gave head to first. Little bitch put me on blast on MTV. I should have downloaded her audio on MP3 and shown the whole world how you gave Eminem VD. Gorgeous. Class act. Then in another song, it gets worse. He writes that he wants to be causing terror to Christina Aguilera when I grab her by the hair and drag her across the Sahara. Beware of this rap terrorist with a therapist. Is the therapist in the room with us right now? Is the therapist in the room with us right now? I think a therapist is not strong enough. We need the police. We need the police in the room. So having her give an award to Eminem is at best uncomfortable and at most kind of dangerous. I would say that one of the downfalls of the VMAs as we enter into the mid-2000s, which was one of the most misogynistic periods of time for pop culture in recent memory, that trafficking and the humiliation of women eventually made their whack event no longer fun to attend or watch. Eminem also gets away unscathed by this. The media and the tabloids do not say anything when he acts appallingly at the VMAs. And what happens to the women who, make a mistake at the VMAs? Hell on earth. Hell to pay. Forever. Case in point, the following year's VMAs featured the now iconic kiss between Madonna and Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera. The media coverage of the kiss trafficked in many boring and stale tropes about women in the public eye, firstly by focusing on the feud between Madonna and Britney and Christina, secondly by holding Britney Spears up once again as the sign of a moral decay in our society. Fox News had a field day with this, and men were just generally emboldened to be disgusting pervs in public by this. So what is the net positive here for Britney Spears? Did this incident bring attention to her projects or her work or help her correct an untrue or unflattering narrative about her in the press? No, beloved. It just made things worse for her and made a lot of money for MTV and everyone else in the meantime. The VMAs enters a bit of a lull period for a couple of years after 2003, really only kind of picking back up again during one of the most controversial VMAs of all time, the 2007 VMAs. This was again Britney Spears, my queen, humiliation day. I'm sure everyone knows this story if you haven't seen my blackout video already, but the context here is that Britney was in the middle of a very public meltdown. She had her kids taken away from her and she was going through a divorce and she was being hounded relentlessly by the media and had just shaved her head. In fact, she was being hounded so relentlessly by the media, they invented laws to prevent what happened to Britney Spears from happening to anyone else. The narrative out there at the time was, look how far America's sweetheart can fall and how much further can we push her? And also, how much money can we make off of it in the meantime? Paparazzos were making hundreds of thousands of dollars just off of stalking Britney Spears. TMZ's Harvey Levin was calling Britney Spears the president of the United States, someone that they had to criticize and follow relentlessly, as though it were in the public's best interest to be kept abreast of Britney Spears' personal tragedies. I'm always going to take any opportunity I can find to defend Britney Spears. But anyway, Britney was kind of set up for failure here. She was performing Gimme More, the lead single from her album Blackout that had just come out. Her rehearsal actually went pretty well. There's footage of her dress rehearsal. She looks gorge. She was kind of iffy on the choreography, but it was mostly okay. There was some backstage commotion that ended up having her come on stage not looking her best. And she gives the infamous performance of Gimme More. And I feel like when you do a side-by-side comparison of the dress rehearsal and the actual performance, you can see how the camera angles are like different and deliberately unflattering. And the most profitable narrative here going into this VMAs was always going to be Britney bombs her performance. And I think MTV did everything in their power to create conditions where that was very likely to happen. And so it did. This event was kind of national news. It literally made the national news the following morning. I remember in Singapore, I watched it on BBC in shock. It was that big of a deal. And MTV loves that because it shows that their award show is the one to watch live. And it gives them a credibility by being, cited and sourced in other kinds of media. This performance for Britney was described as career ending. And meanwhile, it wasn't even really that bad. Lorde literally got on stage and did Homemade Dynamite without singing. That didn't end her career. Britney's journey with the VMAs kind of embodies how female artists were treated in the public eye in the 2000s. We build you up to knock you down. And there is also, I have to note, sadly, an excellent performance by Chris Brown and Rihanna here. It was really, very good. But, we also do not like Chris Brown in this house. During Alicia Keys' performance, Kid Rock and Tommy Lee fighting over a woman because, women are just objects that we buy and trade or mock and exploit, have an altercation. Actually, what happens is Kid Rock ends up punching Tommy Lee in the face. And that's all in one VMA. I would say that from here on out, the VMAs were less focused on the positive side of controversy, iconic performances, fun shade between the attendees, great red carpet looks, and they were more focused on the kinds of damaging narratives that were unleashed on Britney Spears in the 2007 VMAs. I'd love to know how the producers plan out the seating charts because I know there's messy bootsology going on in their heads. This path of production was absolutely reinforced by what some argue is the most consequential and iconic VMAs of all time, the 2009 VMAs. Now, what may seem confusing to you is why the next couple of VMAs were kind of low-key bangers if it was already on its way out by 2007. Well, there's a very good reason for the VMAs' short-lived second wind, and that reason was social media. By 2009, Twitter had completely entered public consciousness, with most notable public figures having set up accounts that they used fairly regularly, especially younger artists and musicians. If you know the experience of streaming something live on Twitch or just tuning into a big conversation that everyone's having at the same time, imagine that happening as a novelty. Before the internet got extremely nicheified and platforms started taking steps to silo content, it was possible for one big event to dominate online conversation for a long-ish period of time. The VMAs and early Twitter are a perfect storm. Pair this with this new celebrity impulse to share every thought on your mind at the flick of a button, with an event known for controversy where celebrities are expected to act the fool, and you have alchemy. There were several viral moments from the VMAs as well. Even if you weren't tuned into the broadcast, you'd probably catch a clip of what happened on YouTube in the following hours and coming days, until it got taken down, but that's an issue we're going to talk about later. By April 2009, 75% of the US internet users were indicating a growing preference for on-demand online content rather than traditional television broadcasts. And this is maybe 8 or 9 years before streaming even really became a thing. MTV had a real opportunity here to make the VMAs even more iconic by licensing their content to YouTube. It would have had a really symbiotic relationship and could have made their cultural impact much stronger. By copyright striking every clip that appears of your broadcast, you're basically shooting your cultural relevancy in the foot. The thought process was, if we make this hard to find online, then people will catch it live. And that is almost never the case. And the VMAs still haven't learned that. When you try to find any of these iconic moments, they are few and far between, or they're clipped in a really weird way. You can't really have a legacy or an impact if you're not present where most people go to find their content. They don't even need to see it anymore. They can just hear about it, being described by some user on TikTok who will have a more interesting take on it than the exact thing happening itself. TV networks are dumb. MTV was also kind of floundering at this period of time in 2009. It was in a transitional stage. TRL had been canceled, and as it turns out, people weren't tuning in just to watch the music videos they could now find on demand, not waiting for their favorite to be played endlessly in a countdown queue on YouTube. MTV was also kind of veering into reality television as well, which was not the kind of lofty artistic goal of spreading the music video medium they had intended. But anyway, I digress. Back to the 2009 VMAs. Shall we talk about the best VMA moment of all time? It was the unforgettable moment that stole the show at the VMAs, Kanye West storming the stage during Taylor Swift's acceptance speech for Best Female Video for You Belong With Me. Kanye, in true Kanye form, grabbed the mic to declare that the award should have gone to Beyonce for her iconic Single Ladies Put a Ring on It video, sending shockwaves throughout Radio City Music Hall and pretty much making every single person in the room hate him. Yo, Taylor, I'm really happy for you, and I'm gonna let you finish, but Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time. He proclaimed, shrugging and leaving a stunned 19-year-old Taylor Swift clutching her first Moon Man in disbelief. The camera then cuts to Beyonce, who could only mouth, "Oh, Kanye," as the world processed what just happened. The next day, even President Obama weighed in, calling Kanye West a jackass, off the record, caught on camera though. Though MTV has since scrubbed the footage of this event from their archives for whatever reason, bootleg versions still live on YouTube, forever immortalizing that wild and iconic VMA moment. I'ma Let You Finish is a classic VMA moment, something that could only ever happen at this event and on live television. Billboard has an incredible oral history of what happened that night, interviewing Viacom and MTV employees and executives about the lead up and the events. The former president of Viacom, Van Toffler, described their approach to curating these events, the VMAs, as let's put the combustible elements in the room, occasionally light a match, get out of the room, and see what happens. This was very much the early approach to reality TV before duty of care was even really a thing. The philosophy was to just let cameras roll in high pressure situations without stepping in or telling anyone what to do, and there was a real hands-off approach to producing this reality television, which led to a lot of drama, but also some really horrible situations that are memorialized forever and could have been stopped had someone just intervened. There are many instances of violence between men and women, uninterrupted by the dozens of crews standing there filming them and watching it happen on early seasons of MTV's reality show, The Real World. So what I'm saying is, MTV has a bit of a reputation for not really issuing the most care in the world to the well-being of the people they are filming. They had spotted Kanye on the red carpet earlier that evening with a bottle of Hennessy in hand. Everyone in that room, in the control room of the VMAs, the MTV people knew that something was not right with him. According to an MTV executive, Kanye actually, before this incident, had not actually been like that much of a loose cannon, and they were kind of surprised that his publicist let him behave this way. Apparently, as everyone took their seats for the televised show, he was passing the liquor bottle around in the crowd. And it's important to note, again, that executives noticed this and were not inclined to do anything about it or monitor him closely because they were excited about the potential for chaos. Kanye was also known for jumping on stage at awards. This was not the first time he had done that, and yet they sat him in the front row. Hamish Hamilton, director of that year's VMAs, said he was kind of praying for something like this to happen because it's a moment of notoriety that goes down in pop culture history. An MTV correspondent remembers that Pete Wentz came up to him and said Kanye was really drunk and that he made me take a swig of his Hennessy. Now, if we're talking about duty of care to your invited guests, you might at least ask the offending person doing this to stop forcing alcohol on people that maybe don't want it. The host of the show, who was improvising some of his lines, wanted to, at the top of the show, crack a joke about Kanye's behavior and antics on the red carpet. The production team immediately nixed this idea because they wanted to focus on the Michael Jackson tribute that was opening the show. He had just died. In hindsight, the host regrets not addressing what was going on in the room because he felt it would have been less surprising for the audience at home to see Kanye storming on stage to interrupt Taylor if there had been some foreshadowing. But you know what? Probably turned out to make it a more iconic moment in hindsight that it was pretty much all by surprise. Now, here's where our other party enters the picture. The Viacom president had worked on the CMTs, which is a country music award, and was witnessing Taylor's very successful pop crossover. When booking talent for this year, he really wanted her to come and perform her crossover hit, You Belong With Me, at the VMAs. He told her team that it was a lot different than doing the VMAs because there's an element of spontaneity and surprise that doesn't happen at the CMTs, where everything is very choreographed and rehearsed to a T. It also, apparently, because of this, wasn't easy to lock Taylor's appearance in. Andrea and Scott Borchetta definitely took some massaging to agree. Now, in the audience, there was no security in the talent section. The reasoning for this was because they didn't want bulky bodyguards taking up the screen. However, that also meant that there was no one there to interrupt or prevent any chaos. And Kanye, rowdy and liquored up as he was, known for jumping on stage, was sat in the front row. And the interruption moment happened very early on in the show, like the first act. It wasn't even a huge award Taylor was winning. I believe it was the first award of the night. She won Best Female Artist Video, not even Video of the Year, which is like the most prestigious video, which Beyonce was already set to win at the end of the night for Single Ladies. This was like the fourth runner-up prize, and the producers backstage are freaking out as soon as this happens. At first, they couldn't tell who was on stage. They thought it might be a fan, and then as quickly as it started, it was over, and Taylor was left mouth agape, completely stunned as they panned to Beyonce. There was no talk about cutting Kanye's mic. It all happened so fast, but I don't think they would have done that anyway because they wanted to see what would happen. They're messy boots. They had a lot of decisions to make in a very short amount of time, and they ultimately decided not to cut to Taylor's face because they weren't sure how she would react. The audience was completely in shock by this. Some people thought it was a stunt, but actually when you think about it, pulling a stunt like this potentially damages the network's relationship with three of their biggest artists in 2009. It was too perfectly television ready for it to be a stunt. Their next big hurdle was getting Taylor ready to perform. Kanye was escorted out of the venue, much to his protestations, and the president of Viacom went to meet with Taylor and her mom, and they were both crying. This was right before she had to go out there and perform on 6th Avenue on top of a taxi cab and sing You Belong With Me. And according to the MTV people, they said that Taylor was completely determined to get it right, and she dealt with it with dignity and professionalism. Meanwhile, apparently, Beyonce is also backstage crying because she feels so bad for Taylor. Queen empath queen. She also wanted to leave the VMAs in that very moment, but the president talked her into staying and suggested that she might like to help make it right for Taylor during her acceptance speech for one of her awards. Here's a quote from the host of the show on how this played out on Twitter. Kanye storming the stage was the first time I realized just how powerful Twitter was in driving audiences to television. If you opened up your timeline that night, your feed was overrun with reactions. If you weren't watching the VMAs and you opened Twitter, it felt like you were missing out on the craziest TV moment of all time. It's also noteworthy to remember that back in 2009, there were no algorithms dictating your feed. Your Twitter timeline was in chronological order. It was ideal for live blogging TV. So when a moment happened, everyone talked about it and you couldn't ignore it. And fans kind of immediately took sides. In hindsight, a lot of the MTV staff believe this moment was iconic because it was totally organic. There had been MTV coordinated stunts in the past. They cite the kiss between Madonna, Britney, and Christina as one of them, but this completely disorganized random outburst they didn't know was coming wound up being the most iconic thing that has ever happened, simply because it couldn't be planned. Lightning in a bottle. And it wasn't just the moment of her getting interrupted either. The story ended up being this entire hero's journey, very cleverly plotted out by the producers. Right after this horrible injustice is done onto her and everybody feels bad for her, she has to wipe her tears and cry, and then goes on to perform. She reclaims her narrative, and at the end of the night, the god of this land, Beyonce, invites out this damsel in distress to have her moment. It's heavily implied by the producers interviewed here that MTV has, ever since this happened, deliberately tried to cause something of this nature by pairing people together who may have tension. That only comes to fruition a couple more times. But that's not all that even happened at the 2009 VMAs. The performances were incredible and are often overlooked by this moment. We had Lady Gaga performing what I would argue is maybe the second best VMA performance of all time. I'm putting Britney Slave for You first, sorry. Gaga's in her breakout year at the tail end of the Fame era, performing Paparazzi. She starts off the performance in an elegant white outfit, supine on the floor, singing solemnly about how she prays the fame won't take her life. But as the performance continues, things take a darker turn. She's pursued on stage by literal paparazzi, becoming more and more frantic, before heading to the piano and playing it like she was possessed, then standing up where blood appears to pour from her chest, symbolizing the brutal nature of celebrity culture. We literally do want our pop stars to bleed for us on stage. That's such a clever comment that Gaga made. There were literal gasps in the audience that you can hear on the broadcast because it seemed for a split second very real that Gaga was actually bleeding. And because she was performing it so convincingly, you believed it. She wipes blood all over herself, then hangs lifelessly from a chandelier at the very end while all the paparazzis take a picture of her dead body. This is art. This is art. Another element of surprise from this evening that was really funny, Lil Mama randomly jumping on stage, also uninvited. What was it with people not knowing their place this evening? At the end of Empire State of Mind, performed by Alicia Keys and Jay-Z, to take credit for their performance? I don't know. She's standing there like nodding to them as though she had always been there, and you can clearly see Jay-Z being like, girl, so confusing. The 2010 VMAs were much hyped due to Taylor and Kanye's dueling performance the following year. Sadly for Taylor, Kanye's performance far outshined her. She did a very melancholy and a bit on-the-nose rendition of the song she wrote about being interrupted, Innocent, basically being like, I forgive you, but I still hate you. It was all right, the performance, but the song itself is nothing special. And she had a perfectly good single out at the time. Mine, heard of it. I think that we could have just taken that opportunity to do a really great performance rather than make a point. But you guys know that Taylor loves to make a point. And meanwhile, Kanye is giving the performance of a lifetime, doing Runaway with Pusha T. He's basically producing live on stage with MPC 2000, a music workstation that was really integral in the creation of his incredible second record, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. It was a bit of a redemption arc for him, and that's the funny thing about the VMAs, is that it could knock you down and ruin your career in 1 year. Kanye literally had to cancel his co-headlining tour with Gaga after that. Then it could be the perfect launching pad for your redemption and next project in the very next year, coming back stronger than a 90s trend. This happened also in 2008 after Britney's Catastrophic 2007 performance. She was honored with 3 award shows, and they opened the show with her winning an award. Kind of, I guess, to say sorry for hounding her and starting off a chain of events that would go on to basically ruin her life. At the 2010 VMAs, Lady Gaga also wore the iconic meat dress made entirely of raw meat, including a meat hat and a meat purse, riling up PETA. And while accepting Video of the Year, she announced that her new album, Born This Way, was going to be released. People were seeded this year as well to tune in and watch live, likely because of the intrigue of last year's nonsense and the face-off between Kanye and Taylor. Clocking 11.4 million live viewers, this would be the penultimate year of great ratings success before the actual decline. So why don't we now talk about that final, truly relevant VMA year? What happened? Well, what always happens. Lady Gaga was acting the fool. Lady Gaga was acting the fool. I was a little monster at this time, and I remember seeing this and being like, enough already, my queen, enough. She was performing as her male alter ego, Joe Calderone. Why? I don't know, and menacing other women in the audience as part of her character. She performed You and I, and Joe tried to kiss Britney when awarding her with the Vanguard Award, and Britney very cleverly, but kind of in like a canned, scripted way, said, "I've already done that before, haha." Beyonce also unveiled her pregnancy to the world in her iconic performance of Love on Top. I mean, this was just a moment. It was a moment to be remembered. That evening, she set a record for the most mentions on Twitter per second, over 8,000 tweets, and helped this VMAs become the most watched in MTV history at 12.4 million viewers. Now, that brings us a huge shock because the very next year, after two or three record high years, the following year pales in comparison with a 50% drop in viewership to only 6 million live viewers. I think this was because they weren't really able to lock in any like super iconic performers. It was mostly newcomers like Frank Ocean, One Direction, and Taylor Swift, who was still, yes, then kind of a newcomer in 2012, debuting her first pop song. And it was also very light on the drama. The absence of a performance by Lady Gaga or Katy Perry and Beyonce was very much felt, I guess, in the reception of the ratings. Something else that I feel made the VMAs really kind of like soulless was that they went for many years without a host during this period of time. And I think a host can kind of really help curate the vibe and bring a show together, especially the VMAs, which is essentially a variety show. It's like a mix of like skits and bits and performances and awards being given. Chris Rock and Russell Brand have both had their turns at it, and they weren't that bad as presenters. Viewership improved again for the 2013 VMAs, though, where they made a concerted effort to drum up some intrigue with the dueling performances of Lady Gaga and Katy Perry. Now, I really remember this being a moment. I remember being very excited for this VMAs because I was a huge Gaga fan and a huge Katy Perry fan, and I was waiting to see who would win. They were definitely early victims of the Stan Wars. Katy and Gaga were both hot off the heels of huge commercial dominance with massive eras, Born This Way and Teenage Dream, and they had both just released new singles, kicking off a brand new era after all the success, and they were vying for that #1 spot with Roar and Applause. And guess what? They were both set to perform both of those songs at the VMAs. I remember the online chatter about this was very, very high. Gaga's performance of Applause is incredible here and I think very underrated. But of course, Roar won the #1 hit because it was just more of a like commercially palatable song. But I think we can all agree that Applause is much more iconic. But we also have another much discussed cultural event here, Miley Cyrus's disastrous performance of We Can't Stop. This was a world stop moment. Miley was desperate to shed her Disney image, and instead of doing it gradually, she said, "You know what, let me just burn this entire house down." She had already released her controversial song about partying and doing drugs called We Can't Stop, and she performed it in a set that reflected the surreality of what her onstage and real life would soon become. She emerges from a giant teddy bear wearing what looks like a romper with like a teddy bear backpack strapped onto it, singing We Can't Stop in a very enthusiastic manner. I would say almost a manic manner, but it all goes to hell even further. It's not a good performance before that, but it goes to hell when Robin Thicke comes out to sing Blurred Lines. He comes out looking like a sleazy old man, and that's kind of how he behaves. Miley strips off the teddy bear to reveal a latex nude bodysuit, which does very much look like she's just naked, and starts wagging her tongue around and simulating self-pleasure with a foam finger. There's nothing sensual about this. It's just very, very graphic. And even Robin Thicke is truly gagged by the way that she's acting. She is grabbing his crotch and twerking on him. The audience is also completely flabbergasted by this behavior. And something clever that the VMAs had started doing, one of their only innovations that actually kind of made sense, was live streaming the crowd. So you could see how celebs were reacting to each other in real time, not just when they knew the camera was cutting to them. Taylor and Selena were, needless to say, completely gagged. Rihanna and One Direction also gagged. Lady Gaga, who herself was in the audience naked, was gagged. This stunt was, I think, safe to say, a net negative for Miley Cyrus. She was really getting criticism from every corner of the internet at this point. Some people were not happy with her objectifying herself in this manner, with Robin Thicke specifically to a song called Blurred Lines, which was a song that had already been starting conversations about not liking having to abide by someone else's bodily autonomy. It's basically a song being like, I don't like consent. And that wasn't really a great vibe to be pairing with what Miley was doing. This also really kicked the cultural appropriation conversation about Miley Cyrus into high gear. Miley was very criticized for her use of black backup dancers while twerking, and some really argued that her performance echoed a history of white people appropriating black culture for artistic and commercial benefit while ignoring the intricacies of the racial dynamics of doing so. There was also a huge amount of body shaming done onto Miley after this. It was one of those things that is like, okay, this will live on in pop culture history, but are you happy about that, Miley Cyrus? It's not like the song was very good or their performance was even interesting. It was just shocking to be shocking. There wasn't really like an artistic statement hidden within it. And I think you can really point to performances like I'm a Slave for You or Oops, I Did It Again that were controversial or sexual and shocking, but had like a merit to them as well. But after this, there isn't really an iconic VMA year. There's a series of performances and moments that we'll talk about that are very iconic, but the days of the VMAs being able to singularly maintain a grip on culture by producing a show that people watched live and commented on all together were well and truly over. And the ratings numbers are completely abysmal compared to the record high of over 11 million, nearly 12 million in 2011. By 2015, it was down to 5 million, and last year's live viewership, 2023, couldn't even crack 1 million. And as the ratings declined, so did MTV's ability to book heavy-hitting talent for their shows. A lack of true stars at their events really kind of made the VMAs feel boring and unremarkable. For example, the biggest cultural event at the 2017 VMAs was the premiere of Look What You Made Me Do. They couldn't even book Taylor to actually show up or perform at the event. All they could get was a screener of her music video. And the only other moment that mattered from that year was Fifth Harmony ejecting an effigy of Camilla off stage. That was kind of a gag to me, a harmonizer, but it also just felt like such a stunt. Because who cares? No one else really cares. Fifth Harmony were not exactly superstars. They had 2 albums out, and Camila was the star, I guess. MTV is a network that has always aimed at capturing the young viewer, but young viewers simply do not watch television anymore. So where does that leave them and the VMAs? Now they're just kind of rebooting old reality shows like Jersey Shore and playing Teen Mom reruns, trying desperately to figure out how to capture the magic of the early 2000s, where you could predictably find an audience all in one place interested in the same thing. But it's just not like that anymore. If they really wanted to meet young people where they were, then they would kind of maybe, I don't know, try something like broadcasting live on TikTok and focus on curating a talent lineup that feels very relevant to that specific younger viewer. But demographics, I will give them, have kind of flattened over time, and it's not so clear what younger people are interested in versus what everyone else is interested in. One of my favorite VMA moments, however, in its later flop years was another lightning in a bottle stunt that couldn't really have been planned. Miley Cyrus was hosting in 2015 and acting the fool the entire night. She had really been on some delusional wave since 2013, and everyone was kind of sick of her act by this point. You know, we were all kind of like, we're shocked. Now what? Now what do we do? She was wearing 2 eyes as a bra, lips as a skirt, an orange visor, and had blonde dreadlocks when Nicki Minaj struck the fear of God into her. Before the VMAs, Miley went on a press run promoting her appearance as the host. Putting a microphone in front of Miley at any point in time during this period was like guaranteeing a viral soundbite because she was just saying anything. Nicki had been tweeting at the VMAs about how they had ignored Anaconda and not nominated it in the right categories or even properly acknowledged it. The white pop girls had a really hard time with that. First, Taylor chimed in on Twitter and was only forgiven when she publicly apologized and then showed up to sing with Nicki at the awards. Nicki's point was that white artists get nominated differently than black artists in pop categories. And Miley took it even a step further, and instead of just minding her business, she said in an interview, it just sounded like Nicki made it all about her. Like, I didn't get my VMAs. Wah, wah, essentially. Wrong road, wrong road, wrong person. After accepting an award, Nicki turns her attention to Miley. They're kind of standing directly opposite each other on different stages separated by the crowd. Nicki turns to Miley and goes,
and now, back to this bitch that had a lot to say about me the other day in the press. Miley, what's good?
I think this singular moment snapped Miley Cyrus out of her bullshit because she immediately went, younger now, I'm younger now, Malibu, Malibu. She had a clear-eyed moment of standing there in her eye bra and her lip panty with the dreadlocks and a visor on and said, you know what? I've taken this too far. And it's not worth it anymore. Miley is speechless by this as Nicki points at her and continues to kind of like goad her. Don't play with me. Miley doesn't know what to say when the camera gets back on her. You can visibly see her shaking. And so she says, we're all in this industry. We all do interviews and we all know how they manipulate shit. Nicki, congratulations. Miley then closes the show with a bunch of drag queens performing Do It. This was kind of a serve, actually. I think this performance is actually pretty cool, but it was definitely eclipsed by her public scalping. And there's barely anything to comment on specifically after this other than some good performances. Taylor Swift announcing Midnights is not a moment. That's just a Taylor Swift moment. It has nothing to do with the VMAs. There's something interesting about it. Beyonce's Lemonade medley, however, I thought was truly, truly incredible. I was there. I was present in the crowd that year. Rihanna's performances that night were also amazing and spread up throughout the night with like radically different sets and vibes. And I feel like for the Vanguard performances, I wish they would do that more rather than just one big medley together. It's just a flop summit for the rest of the years, though. I'm sorry. There's really nothing else to talk about. So let me circle back to what the original question and premise of this video was. What killed the VMAs? Really, it was the internet. The rate at which we metabolize pop culture events means that, first of all, they move quickly. What was once a week-long conversation is now devoted to a few feverish hours, maybe, where everyone exhausts themselves by trying to come up with the most unique take until all the takes have been had and the game isn't fun anymore. So That's one piece of it, but there are so many different kinds of dramas happening now on the internet where we spend all of our time. Not to mention, we have influencers in our midst who serve up drama on a way more regular basis for free and with no self-consciousness than a once-a-year TV show packed with people you don't feel like you personally know. Lower stakes drama has kind of overtaken celebrity drama in a certain respect. The Brooke Schofield and Clinton Kane story, the Who the F Did I Marry, those things were sagas that really kind of captured the internet's conversation in a way that the VMAs used to be able to do. The internet itself is also now more interested in creating nicheified zones rather than being the world's town hall. Remember the producer who described how the Twitter algorithm used to work in 2009, how logging onto Twitter felt like you were jumping into the world's biggest group chat essentially and you were all staying on topic? Yeah, that doesn't really work anymore. So many of the internet's biggest conversations are now held in silos. And I really think about things like Reddit and Discord here as these kind of private walled communities where people are more free to discuss events that feel relevant to them with people that they are like-minded with, not strangers. And the algorithms now don't necessarily promote that kind of all-encompassing discussion the VMAs relied on and took for granted that they could generate. MTV is also kind of stupid. Their content licensing strategy is a complete and total mystery. By making the VMAs a thing that is pretty much only contained to the live broadcast, they're hugely missing the opportunity to invite the wider internet of people that, could maybe be interested in what's going on, that is not really interested at face value to participate. Try finding high quality performance videos of some of the most iconic things I've referenced today, and you won't be able to find them. And for what? What's the point of gatekeeping all of this in the archive and trotting it out in bite-sized pieces, then whacking anyone who tries to share it for posterity on YouTube? When you've got less than 1 million people tuning into your broadcast that once drew almost 12 million live viewers, it's self-defeating to be so guarded about your IP. It's also too little too late for them to course correct it now. If the VMAs don't get buzz and they don't stir up conversations, why would any big star really want to attend? This is the other problem that the VMAs are having. The VMAs are now kind of a flop summit because they can't capture conversation, and the viral moments that could arise from the show are so carefully guarded and not republished. What is the incentive for a star to come here and do something messy? Almost zero. That's why you see them really relying on these vanguard performances and Taylor Swift attending to try and drive some interest. And it still doesn't even really work. The rating spike isn't even really that big when you have Taylor Swift attend, which is what they hope. Otherwise, no one of note is really attending unless they're being honored with some big award. It's rare to get 4, 5, 6 great titans in the place at one time. Usually you just get one. I think we're also kind of in the era of cleaning up our act on the internet a little bit. It's funny because the VMAs really were kind of the breeding ground for a lot of the toxic stan culture that we see now, being seated for celebrity beefs, enjoying watching female performers specifically stumble, pitting our faves against our other faves, all while chiming in like you're better than it somehow. There has definitely been more kind of awakenings, I would say, in how we talk about famous people. A good example about this is the overwhelmingly positive response, I think, to Chappell Roan setting boundaries and talking about toxic fan culture and calling it out, denormalizing it. A bit of recentering of celebrities' humanities is happening, especially because of social media. I also really view MTV in general as sort of a reality television pioneer. They have always been shock jocks from The Real World to Jersey Shore. I don't think the network can get away with half the tricks they pulled in the past, nor have they figured out how to be relevant without doing those tricks. There are so many moments they've televised that simply wouldn't fly today. And I mean, we can look at other reality television networks like Bravo to see that there is things like a reality reckoning happening where we are trying to assess what damage the idea of put a bunch of personalities into a room, then back off and watch them explode has done to our culture. There would rightfully be outrage in this day and age if MTV had Christina Aguilera delivering an award to the man who threatened to drag her across the Sahara Desert. In fact, I think there would be backlash for him even being invited to the event, as there should be. In general, I think perhaps we've just outgrown our need for the VMAs. It's not that there's a lack of drama, we just have other places to seek it out. Their biggest mistake, MTV's biggest mistake, has been keeping the archives off the internet. Fools. And I think celebrities in general are a lot more guarded these days as well. I said earlier in the video that part of the draw of going to the VMAs and playing Russian roulette with, will this slightly controversial action benefit or harm my career, was that in the absence of social media, celebrities had few avenues to create their own narratives about themselves, venues to clap back where the world was watching. Moments like what Mariah and Whitney were able to do, draw some light about their feud and maybe try and put the flames to rest a little bit. But social media has completely eroded the sway that the VMAs had with this kind of opportunity. All of a sudden, you can clear up a rumor with a TikTok, or you can become a cult classic artist simply by word of mouth on the internet. You don't need a national stage to clean up your act and introduce it to the world. For example, this year, the VMAs really need Chappell Roan. Chappell Roan does not need the VMAs. That's all I've got for you in today's video. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you in my next one. Make sure to subscribe if you aren't already, because you must.